Are you a multi-potentialite doing more than one thing because it is a true calling for you to help as many people as you possibly can? It's what fills your bucket or buckets. This week on the Today is the Day Changemakers podcast, I'm joined by the purpose-driven Sarah Giberson, a visionary leader wearing two powerful hats. She's the owner of Pink Moon Yoga, a space she created to inspire grounding, healing, and reconnection. Listen in to hear how this practice came about for her and now how she is sharing it with the community. She's also the director of real estate development and marketing for the Fort Monmouth Economic Revitalization Authority, also known as FMERA, where she's helping breathe new life into a former military base now home to transformational projects like Netflix, breweries, Baseline Social, and so much more, including a new hospital that will open in the future that specializes in renowned cancer treatment. In this episode, Sarah and I dive into the duality of leadership and self-care, what it means to stay purpose-driven, and how to remain rooted while helping entire communities rise. She shares her thoughts on balancing a full life, the importance of arts in our communities, and even reflects on lessons learned from a favorite book of hers by Jay Shetty. This is a conversation for anyone looking to reconnect with themselves, align with their purpose, and be reminded that it's possible to lead with impact while still caring for your soul. Please subscribe to the Today is the Day Changemakers YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. Also, Today is the Day is now hosting events with former Changemaker guests who have so much to share. These are incredible people who you would not typically have the opportunity to meet, as they are from all over the globe. Go to todayisthedayliveit.com for more information. Have a great week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I'm your host, Jody Grinwald, and as I say every single episode, I interview the changemakers, the inspirers, and those who are disrupting the status quo in the best way possible every day. And today, I'm so happy to have my guest, Sarah Giberson. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Jody. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. And for those who may be streaming, you can't see her beautiful backdrop, but she has this beautiful backdrop behind her. And we're going to talk about Pink Moon Yoga and all that she's doing right now. But I'm going to read your bio first, Sarah. Sound good?
Perfect.
All right. So, envisioning her yoga practice as nothing more than a stepping stone to jumpstarting a rigorous fitness routine, Sarah's journey to health and wellness turned into a way of life. Compelled to share this transformative practice with others, Sarah went on to pursue her 200-hour and 500-hour yoga teacher certification. Sarah is also a certified instructor in mat and reformer Pilates and is trained in the Pilates suspension method. That sounds like a lot of fun. And the barbell method. Her additional professional certifications include the Science of Exercise from the University of Colorado, Boulder, and Engineering Health, and Introduction to Yoga and I can't even say this word. Oh my God.
Physiology, is that what it
Thank
says?
you. I can't even say the word physiology from NYU. Sarah opened her first Pink Moon Yoga and Wellness Studio in 2021, her second in 2023, and recently opened Moon Core Reformer Pilates. But that's not all Sarah does. When she's not in the studio, she is the lead of Fort Monmouth's real estate team, serving as the director of real estate development and marketing for over 7 years. Sarah has managed FMERAs, is what it's called in its short acronym for those who don't know. She has managed FMERA's investor and developer attraction, selection, contract negotiations, and project management processes. Sarah oversees FMERA's governance and communication functions and serves as FMERA's public relations liaison. There's so much there, Sarah, truly so much there. And I couldn't say physiological or what is it? Oh my God.
Physiology.
Physiology. What is wrong with me today? Okay. I don't know. Some days we can't say certain words. Physiology. I'm gonna have to practice that one. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have you. And I don't even know where to start because you have so many great things going on. But I do want to start with, as I do with most of my, guests, is where did you grow up? And what kind of a child were you? Outgoing, quiet? Who was Sarah?
So I did grow up in Seaside Park near Island Beach State Park. I always throw that in because, for anyone who was a fan of some reality TV in the 2000s, I always like to differentiate that it is not the same as the Jersey Shore you saw on TV. So I did grow up as a beach kid, spent a lot of time by the beach, by the ocean. and it's somewhere that I've been drawn back to. So, I did later in my life spend some time living in Jersey City and other places, but ultimately the shore is really where my heart is. So, I've been down here since I guess my family moved down here when I was about 4 years old. So grew up down here, went to school in Seaside Park, and then, the rest of my, schooling basically in this area until I was off in college. But I pretty much was always an outgoing child, very energetic, and always excited to do new things. I always laughed because when I was in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher would give out these awards like at the end of the year. And I got an award for asking what we were going to do next, which I'm not sure was an award more than a citation of the fact that maybe I drove her a little crazy because I was always excited in getting into the next project. So, Jody, you know me pretty well at this point in time. I think probably that translates to adulthood, right? That, I'm always trying to do a million things at once. So, I think I did that as a kid and I do it now. I've always been really interested in service and helping people. So even when I was a kid, me and my best friend growing up, we started a little club called the Let's Make a Difference Club. And that was actually based on, if you remember way back in the day, Rosie O'Donnell, again, before maybe she had any controversy surrounding her when she had her TV show, she had a Let's Make a Difference Club. So we actually were sort of inspired to do that and to try to do little do-gooder things like in our community. So from the time I was little, I've always been interested in sort of helping other people and being a part of community. So I hope to translate that, into my adulthood now with what I do.
I love the Let's Make a Difference Club. And how old were you when you started that?
Ooh, I'm gonna say we were probably maybe in like second or third grade. I can't remember 100%, but one of our funniest stories is one time we decided that we wanted to sell handmade Beanie Babies to raise money. And then our mothers wanted to I don't know what us because we decided we also wanted them to be waterproof because some parent asked us if they could be like tub friendly. So of course us as, however old we were, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, we're like, yeah, sure, no problem. Like we'll make them terry cloth. So, we were always very entrepreneurial even as little kids.
Look at that. And yes, and that is a rarity. But your energy, absolutely, I can envision you as the child with all this energy because you always have all of that or surrounding you and around you. And I can also see you with the what's next, right? Because you're also
Yes.
so we're all so busy. And we'll talk more about that, about the juggle and the struggle of trying to do all the things that we're so passionate about, because I know that firsthand too. And there's only so much time in a day that we can do all the things we want to do. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But so then as you were growing up, what did you think you were going to do and be when you grew up?
Oh goodness. I mean, I think this plays into me doing a million things at once, right? Because when I was a kid, I did really for a long time I wanted to be a veterinarian because I love animals. So again, I just feel like being sort of helpful and compassionate has been something that always kind of was at my core. I'm, certainly not a perfect person, but I had this love for animals and also just for all things that are small and in need of someone else's support, right? But then of course, as a child, you don't realize that also there's a not so great side to being a veterinarian. So I very quickly realized that I could not probably deal with the sad side of dealing with sick pets and animals as much as I still love them to this day. As I got a little bit older, I really got very interested in design work. So that was one of the things that actually became an interest of mine later in life. So of course, that's not necessarily something that's super helpful or in the wheelhouse, right, of helping people, but it was just something I was drawn to. So ultimately, having that interest and then sort of kind of developing that skill set did turn into something where I could help some people because I've definitely worked on some different campaigns for people, whether it was for people I believed in politically or whatever their mission was. I've done some work for nonprofits, sort of from a donation standpoint, everything from invitations to galas, invitations for friends to weddings and things like that. So ultimately, I found a way to sort of give back, if you will, through doing that. But that was kind of my first jumping off point after college was I really was involved in design and marketing. And then things kind of just exploded beyond that into sort of all these different avenues where I am today.
So did you find yourself at, like right out of college in nonprofit?
So my very first job was not nonprofit, but I've only ever had one sort of career level job that was not a nonprofit or a job that had sort of like a public benefit. So I did initially have a job working for a design firm. I then ultimately decided that one of the reasons that wasn't going to be sort of my direct pathway was I'm also really passionate about the things that I believe in and that I think are a great representation of, be it a brand or a message or whatever. And sometimes when you're a creative person and you have clients, they don't always necessarily align, right, with what you think makes the most sense. And that kind of goes with the job. But sometimes you also feel like you don't want to put sort of your name or reputation right on something that you don't like believe in. So that was one of the things that actually caused me to kind of move away from that a little bit more, because working independently in design, I could choose what sort of clients I wanted to work with. Whereas if I worked for a design firm and I was, given a project, well, it's just your responsibility to do what the client asks, right? And I get that and I respect it, but ultimately I decided it just wasn't the route I wanted to stick with. So after that, I did end up moving into the nonprofit space, which again just kind of circles back to who I am at my core. I love to do mission-based work. So my first nonprofit job, I actually worked primarily with individuals with developmental disabilities. After that, I did move more back into the art space. I worked at a theater, an arts council. I worked for an independent film festival. So a lot of things that have this sort of creativity component, but also nonprofits where they're looking to really make an impact on the community. And when you're looking to fundraise, that you can give opportunities to people who don't have the means otherwise to maybe participate in some of those really great programs. So now that I'm at the fort, it's not a nonprofit. We are a government authority, but I will say we do have a mission, and part of the mission is obviously to reinvigorate a community that really was suffering. So from that perspective, I do feel like I'm still staying strong, right, to my roots of wanting to be in mission-based work from that perspective.
How long were you working for nonprofits before FMERA?
Let's see. Well, I'm gonna say maybe 7 or 8 years before that.
And on the fundraising side, or you did other things?
No, I mostly worked in marketing. So again, sort of still in that marketing design space. I did, as you know, Jody, from being at nonprofits a lot, right? We all kind of wear many hats. So you get involved in the fundraising and the outreach and the sort of trying to, build up whether it's membership or donors or other. But my primary role was generally in marketing. So I started out in more of an entry level marketing and design positions. And then before I moved over to FMERA, I was the director of marketing at Monmouth Arts Council, which is in Red Bank. So
Oh, I didn't know you worked there. See, I learn about, even
yeah.
though I sometimes know personally for quite some time my guests, I don't know certain things about them. So I
Yeah,
learned it here on the podcast. It's awesome.
that's
So that's
right.
yeah, that's great. And so because you said you worked for different arts organizations, and knowing that I have a nonprofit that's about arts for kids, what would you say to someone? Because I think it's always good, because most people I don't think understand how important the arts is, and working in
Sure.
nonprofit for the arts. What would be your message to someone who may be listening, of what the arts gives back to the community, to kids, to whomever is benefiting?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I could talk about that for hours of time because there's so many different facets of why the arts are important. I think from a more thinking about just our society and like the economic impact standpoint, the arts are essentially a multiplier for everything in a community. So if you have a community that has a theater, for example, if people are going to the theater, they're most likely also going to go out to dinner. They might stay in a hotel locally. So there's this sort of snowball effect that there's this economic impact of the arts that sometimes I think people forget about. The one thing I will say about having worked in the arts was that I felt like the arts of all and sort of facets, right, of where you could be in the nonprofit space,
Hmm.
arts are one of the ones that was sort of the hardest to fight for when it came to funding or other, because there
Yes.
are a lot of things that compete with the arts that are really important, and when you were working at an arts organization, maybe standing up against an organization that helps battered women and children, right? And you're fighting for grant funding, it's really
Right.
hard, right? Because that seems like
Right.
there's this immediate need, there's this sort of disaster situation where, people need help. And that's all very true. But the arts have such a long-standing economic impact and an emotional impact, and give people pathways to other opportunities that they may not have otherwise had. So, you know, the arts are one of those things that I think just brings so much joy into people's lives. And I think a lot of times people don't think too intentionally about what the arts encompasses. So if you're somebody who turns on the radio, you turn on a television, I mean, that's art. So, when people feel like the arts are not something where you have the capacity to make money or to be successful or any of those things, it's just so not true. And obviously the arts expands to everything, whether it's something that's digital media, whether it's fine art and you're a painter. And the arts just also have such a therapeutic quality, whether you're participating in them or whether you're somebody who actually is a practicing artist. It's something that is just so meaningful if you just put your mind to it and say, this is an opportunity for me to just escape, to breathe, to create. Just the way we do in yoga, where we talk a lot about journaling and other ways to sort of redirect yourself when you're stressed or anything else. I mean, art is another opportunity for that. I'm sure if you have an arts organization, you'll know all too well like the impact that the arts can have on children, particularly children who are living in places of economic strife, or if they're struggling with home situations. Again, it is an escape for them. And it's not just an escape physically, it's something where they have this opportunity to sort of rewire their brain, right? And give themselves this opportunity to have their own voice, to be creative, and again, to just have that experience and even to build relationships with other people who have similar interests. So, as I said, I could talk about the arts forever. They're just so beautiful and amazing. There's so many facets, and it breaks my heart when the arts doesn't get the attention it deserves, because it's so critical to our communities. And you look around some of the cities in New Jersey who have struggled. And all of a sudden, when you see murals popping up and street art and other, pop-up installations, they create places, right, that people want to go. And when people want to go, they invest, and that's what brings things back to life. So it's just, they're part of the cycle, right, of just making things sort of amazing and accessible. And again, I just go back to joy. Like, the arts just bring joy into people's lives.
You're speaking my language, that is for sure. And whenever I hear any of my guests are connected to the arts, I always, or have been, I always bring it up, because I feel like the more we share about the fact of what it can bring, the arts organizations need support too. They need a little love too. It makes a major difference in the communities. But you can tell that you work for FMERA too, because the first thing you brought up was the economic impact
Sure.
of the of the arts in the community, because your passion, from what I'm seeing from this side of the Zoom screen and knowing you, is your passion for the work that you do at FMERA. Is it, you just gleam with it, and you are so knowledgeable, and you start running off all the things, which I won't make you do on this podcast, all the things that is going on, and we'll explain what FMERA is in a minute. But I just want the audience to know, for those who don't know you personally, you would think you are working for a nonprofit with the amount of excitement and passion you have for the work that you're doing. So before we go deep into this, why don't you talk to, let everybody know, what is this thing called FMERA?
Sure. Happy to. So, again, I could talk about this for 2 hours too, as Jody has seen me on other occasions do. So FMERA is short for Fort Monmouth Economic Revitalization Authority. So it's a very long-winded word. So we typically stick with the acronym, but we are the authority who was charged with redeveloping the former Fort Monmouth, which is a closed Army base. So there's a process at the federal government level, that's called BRAC. And essentially, BRAC is a decision that is made at the federal level, where they decide that a fort or a installation of some sort essentially has sort of completed its mission, if you will, or the work that the mission needs to do is no longer necessary at that particular location. So it's essentially the decommissioning of a base or an other installation that no longer is needed from the perspective of the federal government. So Fort Monmouth was a huge economic driver in Monmouth County. So it's actually in 3 communities: Tinton Falls, Eatontown, and Oceanport. And the fort actually closed more than a decade ago. Now at this point, we're almost 2 decades ago. So when we look back to sort of the fort, this idea of the fort closing, it was really difficult for a lot of people in the community to kind of swallow this idea that this was going to go away, because not only were there countless civilian employees who were living and working in the area, but also obviously military families there who had made their home there, lots of memories there, et cetera, et cetera. So what our job is to take is this 1,200-acre piece of property and to redevelop it in accordance with a plan that was designed by our predecessor agency. And the reason I mentioned the plan is because one of the things that's really important to FMERA and important to our mission is, while sort of economic revitalization is our focus, it's to do economic revitalization in a way that is meaningful to the communities and has this sort of diverse mix of opportunities that creates this, if you will, live, work, play type of environment. So it was not our intention to sort of just find one big end user to come in, take up all this land and decide, like, we're going to build all residential, or we're going to build all commercial. So this plan has been our guideline, and obviously we have the capacity to sort of amend the plan, if you will, because of course, we took title to the first portion of the fort in 2014. So if you think about how drastically sort of the economic landscape has changed since that point in time, some of the ideas that were put in this plan, which was written in either 2007 or 2008, obviously some things have changed about the market and what the demand is. So we want to also be mindful, right, about what the need is now in the community. So, as of this time, we've got about 86% of the fort that's redeveloped or under contract. And we have such an amazing, incredible mix of things going on there. And I won't name them all, so I'll just try to name a few. But we've got everything from, a private all-girls school that's STEM focused, so really highlighting an opportunity that wasn't available, because there's a lot of great private schools for young men in the region, but not as many for women. So that's a great opportunity. Trinity Hall. Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Health is building a state-of-the-art cancer center. So just making that sort of opportunity more available and more accessible to people who are in need of those types of treatments, which, I mean, how can we complain, right, about having more opportunities to better our own health and find care for ourselves and others? So that's another huge one. We've got several tech companies. We actually have a defense contractor who, he and his wife worked at the fort before it closed. They decided to buy a piece of property, prop up their own sort of entity at the fort, and they still work with the fort's mission, which has actually moved down to Maryland. So that's just kind of a cool second generation, thing that's gone on there. And again, lots of retail coming online, lots of residential. We've got breweries, eateries, we've got a marina, all kinds of good stuff. And of course, the thing that people get most excited about, which again is super exciting, but I don't want to, skip giving the love to all these other great projects and people who trusted to, invest in our project. But we've got Netflix coming. So when you talk about the arts, right, like this is a huge one for the region. So they are purchasing almost 300 acres from us. It's 282 acres. And they'll be building a state-of-the-art sound studios, a huge campus that's going to have all sort of the support services that go along with that. So they're looking at a minimum of 12 sound stages. So the amount of production they'll be able to do is just huge. It's obviously going to create great opportunities for people in this area, whether they're people who work more in like union type trades, like tradespeople who might be working on lighting and rigging and all other things related to production, or people who are more on the creative side of things, whether you're looking to be an extra or work on makeup or whatever else. So there's just all kinds of opportunities that are going to exist for that. So they're pretty early stage in their project in the grand scheme, because this is a huge project. So if you drive through the fort at this time, you won't actually see anything that makes you think Netflix is about to build a studio campus. But we're hoping that in the next couple of months, they're going to start doing some demolition of existing structures that are on site that won't be reused. Another really cool thing about our work is we have tried, in the instances where we can, to encourage the reuse and repurposing of assets. So granted, they will not be able to use a lot, but Netflix is going to reuse a couple of buildings and structures that were on the fort, as well as some other entities have done this too. That defense contractor I mentioned earlier, they actually purchased a building and renovated it and rehabbed it and brought it up to sort of modern standards. So that was another goal of the plan, right, is to try to be sustainable in that way, to see if we could reuse some of these assets. So we just have so many great things going on there. Again, it's something I could talk about endlessly. But one of the reasons I actually went over to the fort is, as much as I didn't really want to leave the art space and the nonprofit space, right, is someone actually reached out to me at the fort. He's since retired, but he actually reached out to me to say, hey, we really need somebody like you to help us remarket the property in a way that's going to attract people who are not just business people, if you will, right? So it was also important before I got there to some of the staff people to make sure we also had these opportunities available to people who were interested in arts and entertainment and sort of placemaking, if you're familiar with the term, right? So that way it became a place that was not just somewhere that someone either went to do business or went to, go to sleep at night, when they buy their apartment or their single family home. So I've been involved in sort of a lot of the projects that have more of this kind of arts flair, if you will. Obviously, Netflix being the largest of them all. So that's super exciting.
It's very exciting, and I know you're like the sought after person in the community. Everybody wants to talk to you. You're the superstar in the community because of your closeness with Netflix, as well as all the other things that are happening there. And I have a family member who has an organization there, an eatery there, which is amazing, and we're so happy that he is there. So there's a lot of work still happening, and you mentioned, and I know this I wanted to talk about the live work play piece because I think that's becoming very popular. I don't know if that's happening. I think it is across the country, not just here in the state of New Jersey. But talk a little bit about that, because what I do love about that, that's about bringing community together, right? So you've got all the wonderful businesses there. You're living there, you get to play there. Talk a little bit about the what that's going to look like eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in our plan, a couple of the goals that were set forth for the fort was not only obviously the redevelopment and the thing that would be the economic drivers, if you will. It was also this idea of creating these spaces, right, that would be publicly accessible and that people could enjoy. So, one of the things we've looked a lot at is connectivity. So, one of the things you can expect to see at the fort once everything is sort of built out is a fort-wide walking trail. So obviously mentioned that the fort is 1,200 acres and we're actually in two separate sections. So we are divided by a highway and some other areas of the town that are not actually considered part of the fort. So the trail itself will primarily be on what we call the main post, which is the largest portion of the fort, which is in Eatontown and Oceanport. But that's going to be a giant loop that essentially gives people the opportunity to walk around the entire site to sort of meander, right? So that they have this ability to kind of check out all different things that are going on. Maybe you stop down at one place to get a bite to eat. You want to sit outside on a bench and look over at the river over there. You have that opportunity too. So we've really tried to create spaces, right, that make people want to not just come and do what they need to do and leave, but that they're then interested, right, in sort of walking around and seeing what else is going on. And hopefully they're interested in popping out into somebody else's business, right? And checking out what they've got going. So in addition to that, we had a goal of trying to preserve up to 40% open space on the fort. So that's another thing that I think sort of encourages this live, work, play environment, right? Is because for those of you who are maybe living outside of a city, right, and you want to live in more of a bedroom community, but you still want access to good stuff like food and entertainment and all of that. It's also really nice to have beautiful outdoor spaces because most of us don't want to, just feel like we can reach out our window and touch our neighbor, which is how a lot of us feel in New Jersey, right? There's a lot of development. We're a highly populated state. So we've got a couple of areas where we have these really beautiful, vast open spaces, green spaces that we expect in the future will be used by the municipalities for sports things. They might be used for outdoor events. We've had a couple of festivals actually at the fort already, some of them being partially on privately owned property at this point, like properties that have already been developed, but also kind of spilling into some of the property that we still own. So we've had a food truck festival already. We've had several sort of 5K type races that have supported good initiatives. One of the parks actually that we sold to the borough of Eatontown, that is actually now dedicated to someone in the military who is from Eatontown that lost their life in Iraq. So again, another way to sort of pay some tribute, right, to the idea that we had this fort to keep things local, right, to sort of celebrate this person. And then also that park is being developed now into a space where it's going to have a splash pad, it's going to have a dog park, it's going to have a little sort of concession stand. So again, something that people can use and enjoy that's always sort of available to them. So when you talk about live, work, play, the way you get people to stay places, right, is to create things that are desirable, that are pretty, that are beautiful. You encourage them to sit down, to pop down with a book. So we're really trying to work on that. And it's tough because we're a team of 7 people. So in addition to redeveloping all this property and working on contracts and all the things that are sort of business centric, these are the things we're trying not to lose sight of. So we've got some plans to try to prop up some historic signage along the path. So that way people have some idea about sort of like what was here before, all these beautiful new businesses and residences popped up. So we're trying to also kind of encourage people to keep that history of the fort alive. And I think a lot of that plays into this idea again of live, work, play. And then if you want to get really literal on the play, right, we're not as much involved in the tenants when it comes down to, say, a retail developer who develops like a larger, center where they're going to bring in tenants. But of course, they have incentive, right, to also bring in like a really great mix as well. So just to speak about one development in particular, I know for sure they're bringing in a company that does like squash and pickleball. They're bringing in another company that has sort of an American Ninja Warrior type vibe where you can do these sort of obstacle type courses. We've already got on site, we've got doctors, we've got chiropractors, we've got sort of your one-stop shop, right? For like whether you want to go out and have a cocktail at happy hour or you feel like, you need to go get an adjustment on your lunch hour. We've really encouraged that sort of diversity of uses. And that's the beauty of the reuse plan too, right? Is that we know we had a target of getting this mix. So that way it was somewhere again that fit that sort of, I know it's kind of a term that's kind of thrown around a lot, the live, work, play, but it is true, right? It's like we all want to be in a place where we can not only get our jobs done, but we feel good about it at the end of the day and we want to spend time there, right? So we work hard to try to make sure that that's the kind of development we have going at the fort.
I don't, I actually sounds to me like I want to move there because it's just sound,
Please do.
getting in my car and driving in the traffic in New Jersey is just so much fun. So it sounds like, in that case, you don't really have to go too far for much. Just a quick side note, how many people will be able to live in the area there? Do you know?
So, we in our reuse plan had a target of 1,585 residential units. The reason I say target is because that has fluctuated a little bit over time. And some of that is because we're also super respectful of like what the municipalities desire to sort of have in their community as far as what is sort of happening in their school systems and others. So, for example, Eatontown actually took on all the children who lived on the fort in their school system. It didn't sort of matter what area of the fort you lived in. So Eatontown, for example, they've got a lot of sort of room in their schools, right? Because they lost all these students who used to be part of their population. Oceanport, on the other hand, they're a very small community. They don't have a ton of space. And we're trying to be mindful, right, of like, we don't want to overburden any particular community. So Eatontown has been very development friendly when it came to residential and commercial and other, just because they had a need, right? The other sort of important thing about our residential redevelopment is that we also have a 20% affordable component. So anyone who develops residential, 20% of the units they construct have to be affordable housing. And the one thing that I think is really important to mention about affordable housing, because there is unfortunately some attitudes from people, the sort of NIMBY attitude, right? Of not in my backyard. I don't want some particular type of person living near me or around me. And it's just a really unfortunate perspective that I always try to do my best to sort of break down because, there are people, especially in Monmouth County, where the median income is very high. The woman who does your hair, the man who does your nails, the teacher for your second grade student or child, they could be people who qualify for affordable housing. So, just when there's a need for affordable housing, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is some sort of nefarious type person, right? And
Yes.
also I think we should just be willing to lend a hand to people when they're down, right? And hope that we're giving them an opportunity to get on their feet. And one of the great opportunities at the fort is, if you're moving into an affordable unit, you're again living in a place where you probably have an opportunity to walk to a job that you're able to get because we have a wide variety of opportunities, whether you're somebody who maybe didn't make it out of high school or you're somebody who has a, higher education degree, there's going to be all kinds of opportunities. And because we have this really great community coming online, maybe if you don't have a car or other, you're still going to have an opportunity for it. So as far as the number goes, right now, I don't think we'll get to 1585. One of the reasons being is just that the Netflix development, when they came in, when we bid out that property, we have to sell all of our property through a public bidding process. So it's competitive. They had to compete in the fair market essentially against everybody to get this property. That property had an opportunity to be constructed with some residential units. Obviously, Netflix being a film studio, they did not opt to include residential in their project. So we will be building the affordable units that would have otherwise been built had the market rate been built. But there were about, I'm going to say 534, don't quote me in the exact number, but about 534 units that I think could have been built in total. So since those aren't being built, we're just going to pull out that 20%, which is going to be slightly over 100 that will still get built. Beyond that, though, the rest of it's been built. So we will have at least around 1,000 units that are built, variety of unit types. So everything from stacked flats, single family homes, apartments, condos. So kind of everything across the board. So we really have a mix of unit types and a mix of prices that makes it, accessible to different sort of income levels, which is nice too.
That's awesome. And is there an estimated date for that to be done that you can share? If not, no
The
worries.
housing.
Yeah.
No, because right now all of the market rate housing, provided that no projects that are sort of ongoing or under contract, that nothing changes with them, all of the market rate housing is actually spoken for. So like the 1,000 or so units, they're either built or being built at this point in time. We do still have a couple of affordable developments that need to be constructed that haven't even started yet. So those I can't really give you a timeline on yet because we haven't even started the sort of bidding process for them. But the other units, we should be fully done and built with those, I would say easily within the next year to year and a half, pending that we don't have another COVID or any one of those types of things that
Right.
creates, a big wrench in the mix. But the homes are really beautiful. We've got waterfront opportunities. We've got other homes that are smaller, a little bit closer to the parkway, more accessible. So everything kind of across the board.
Yeah, it's we can make the whole podcast about this, and I don't want to because I want to get into Pink Moon and
Yeah.
what you're doing. But I will say that it truly is incredible. And I should mention Baseline Social because they are on the fort, and
Yeah, please do.
that's the restaurant that I was talking about, and they're incredible. And Greg Bartz is one of the owners there, so we'll give a shout out to them on the podcast. So they're really awesome. I wanted to also just last thing on this before we move over to Pink Moon is that you had mentioned that there's going to be 12 sound stages that Netflix is going to build. Did they give you an interesting number of how many jobs are going to be or how many people are going to be coming into the area? I mean, I know that's kind of a tough question.
So I can't really give you a specific answer just due to the nature of the contract
Yeah,
involving it. But
of course.
with production, the one sort of really interesting thing, and actually this was sort of a learning thing for me when they first came in with their bid, is that production jobs obviously are typically rolling, right? Because people are essentially usually they belong to a specific production. So they kind of come in, do their work, and then they move along to the next thing. So jobs are going to be created on sort of a rolling basis. There will obviously be some other opportunities that are more for Netflix proper, right? As far as things that might be more administrative or business in nature. But easily, I'm going to say that probably they'll create somewhere between 1,500, 1,600 sort of jobs from the get-go. There'll be lots of other construction jobs and other that happen, prior to that. But they do actually have to, as a part of their proposal to us, not just Netflix, anyone who bids on a property at the fort, since that economic revitalization is such a big important component for us, they do actually have to give us a job creation number when they propose. And if they don't create that number of jobs, they're actually fined, if you will, for not having created them. So they get a certain timeline to actually create them and report on them. So, again, don't quote me on that 1,500 number. It's not fresh in my mind, but it's well over 1,000. And I'm sure we'll see that continue on a rolling sort of basis.
Yeah, I didn't want to put you on the spot, but the reason I
That's
say
okay.
that is that I think it's going to be it's such an incredible opportunity for New Jersey, as you said. It's just an incredible opportunity for the area. And I want people to know that there's this amazing thing going to be happening down the road. And if you're in that field, start keep your eyes open because there can be opportunities for you. But so while you've been at FMERA, is that when you started to think about building Pink Moon?
So I was a yoga teacher before and a Pilates teacher before I moved to FMERA. But I will say, actually, ironically, the sort of kickstart for me to go out there and take the plunge to start a studio was actually during COVID, because it was kind of the time where even though we were still, I hate to say business as usual because no one was business as usual, but even though we were still open, right, and operating at FMERA, there was just a lot more sort of time, right, to spend and reflect on the things that are important and that you wanted to be focused on. So of course, even though we were working, doing our Zoom meetings and everything else every morning and night, right? We basically weren't really leaving our homes, but for maybe going on walks or seeing the beach or doing whatever we might do. So it just really gave me this opportunity to just really think about how impactful yoga had been to my life. And again, it just circles back to my desire to want to give it back to other people, right? So I'll never forget one day I was in a class. Again, I was not teaching, I was just a student in the class. And I'd just been going through a tough time, like personally, and I felt like I was going to have this like anxiety attack while I was in this class. And as I was on my mat, I just went back to this idea, right? Of like, well, what has yoga taught you, right? Like, you need to look inward, you need to be present in the here and now. Like, you can solve everything with a deep breath. And now, of course, that's not really the case, but you get where I'm going with this, right? It's like this
Mhm.
idea of learning these skills that basically can get you through something that's really difficult. And that does not negate, obviously, all the other opportunities there are out there to speak to somebody or do anything else that you feel like you need to do to take care of your own physical or mental health, right? But yoga to me, I started on it, as you mentioned, right? When you read my bio, as a way to get back into fitness. Like, I used to be somebody who was super active. I kind of let it trail off after college. And I got back into it just as, oh, yoga's going to be easy. I'm going to do that. And that's going to be my method for moving. Right. But when I got into it, it was so much more than the movement. It had so much to do with this mind body connection and this ability to just say, this is something I can go to when I'm feeling overwhelmed, when I'm feeling stressed. And the impact it had on my life just felt like something that I needed to share with other people. Like, it felt like it would be a disservice, right? Not to try to encourage other people to say, there are these other things you can be doing that are not necessarily traditional or conventional, but there's these other ways that you can try to find an outlet for yourself, whether it's as simple as just saying, hey, I need some me time, or whether you're going through something really tough because, you know, I can only speak for my studio, but if you come into our space and you're having a tough day and you're on your mat and you take a child's pose and you're crying, we're fine with it. Like, we want you to let it all out. We want you to feel like this is a space where you're safe to do what you need to serve yourself. Sure, one of us might come over and tap you on the shoulder and make sure you're okay, but um I just wanted to create a space where people felt safe to be who they are. They felt like it was a place that could be a haven. And I'll probably get emotional talking about it because I have students who I just know that they've come up to me and taken the time to say, when something really hard was happening in their life, this is what saved them. So, like, how can you
Mm.
not give that back to people, you know? I've unfortunately had a couple of students, all women in particular, who lost husbands over the course of time that I've been, having the studio. And Pink Moon was the place where they would go when they needed to just find that peace and try to figure out how they were going to get through this horrific loss. And there's nothing more meaningful to me than, when a person is going through something difficult, takes the time to just say to you, listen, like, I can't be grateful enough that you're here. Like, please don't ever go anywhere. Like, this is where I feel safe and healed and all the things that you really hope to bring to people. So, that was the impetus, was healing myself a bit, right? And then feeling like I want to do that for other people.
So this gives you, do you find that it even wound up giving you more than you ever dreamed it would?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because I went into it, like I said, with a fitness mindset, and, going into Pilates, it's a different sort of discipline than yoga, but it does really also have that sort of mind body connection that yoga does. And until you get into it, you might again be thinking of it more as a workout than a work in, as we like to say in yoga. So just between the sort of physical strength I've been able to develop myself, help me overcome some physical injuries, because I think too, we don't often make that connection, right, between your physical state and your mental and emotional state. Because when we're in pain, when we're suffering, when we feel like we can't do our best or be the best version of ourselves, that takes a toll on us, right? Like, mentally and emotionally. So this opportunity to sort of combine that, right? Whether you're somebody who is physically struggling or emotionally struggling, just to be able to witness that transformation in people is it's the greatest gift. When we always talk about gratitude in yoga, And I've got a good friend of mine who she's, owns her own business too. She owns a hair salon though. She's not, a yogi, but we always talk about, right? Like you almost harbor some guilt, right? When you feel so rewarded over the results of what you offer to people. But it comes from this place of absolute, like, just joy for someone else, like to just see someone feel good in their own skin, in their own headspace. So it really is more than I could have ever imagined because I really did. I thought, we're gonna do some yoga. It's gonna be fun. Like I'm gonna, hopefully people feel a little bit less stressed, but I never imagined that people would go out of their way to sort of give us this sort of personal feedback, right? That said, you've changed my life. And, that's not just to me personally, right? It's to all the amazing people who I have here working with me, offering the gifts that they have, right? Because we all also have different sort of approaches to the practice. And I think that's another thing that makes this such a great space is we're really not just rooted in one specific thing. I really truly believe in people being authentic and sharing what they feel is true to themselves because ultimately if you're being authentic, that's what's going to have the most impact for other people who are in the room. Each and every one of us may not be for every student, right? They find the person who feels like speaks to them the most. But that's what's so beautiful about it, right? Is you get this opportunity to bring people together to see this sort of support happening, and sort of circling back to that mention about the students with loss, right? Like I've actually seen students come together for the same purposes. So, I had one woman who she's one of those people I mentioned who lost her husband. She, a year later, witnessed somebody else go through the same thing. And she was the first person who was at her doorstep, leaving her food, giving her references to, support groups, for when you've lost a partner. So, it's not only seeing what we can do to change people and to help them and support them, it's also seeing these beautiful relationships that they create themselves because they know we're creating a space where we want to see connection, we want to see support, and that's just something that is even in the days where I feel super tired with all the work that I'm doing, right? I may even be dragging my butt to get here, but once I actually get into the practice, it just totally changes my perspective. And I'm always grateful when it's done?
Well, you're building community in both areas, your
Yeah,
full-time job
absolutely.
and what you're building here at Pink Moon. And it all is, you don't even realize it that you're putting, like even Changemakers became a community because you're putting once you start putting like-minded people together, there's an ignition right there. And then they kind of, it takes on its own entity. It's a beautiful gift. And so I understand how important that gift is. So I don't think you know the story. I'm going to share it here, real quick. So when I was having this is what 5 years now. 5 years ago, something major happened in my life, and my friend said to me, "Why don't we go take a yoga class?" I'm like, "I can't do yoga. I don't have the flexibility. This is it. This doesn't make any sense. You want to do this?" I said, "But I do like the side of kind of going inward." And she mentions to me that there's a place in Brielle. Now, Barnegat and Brielle are nowhere near each other. Okay. So to find this place in Brielle, and it's in a library, and we have no idea, like neither one of us have any relation to it. She lives in Tom's River, but she said, "I heard good things through someone else." I said, "Okay." And we went. And I cried. I was one of those criers, because I was going through something at that point. And I remember, like, there were poses I couldn't do. And I share this because I want people to understand. And I'm going to ask you there's a question coming from this soon. Um, but there were poses I couldn't do. And they gave us other options, right? So they said, if you can't do this instead. And if I couldn't do either, I just didn't do that. And I breathed through it. And but it did, and I remember it to this day, and I need to get myself back in the studio. I did go back twice, but I need to come to the new location, and I'm going to making that commitment on the podcast now. But I just wanted to share that there are so many stories you don't know about, number one. And number two, I want people who are out there now, your two locations, and I'll have you share them in a minute, but your two locations are in two different towns. But I want you to share with those people who feel like, I can't do poses. I'm not flexible. Like, I'm sure you hear this all the time. And I still am that person. I actually think my knees got worse. But talk to us. What do those of us who are, just a tad bit over 50, what do we do?
So the one thing I will mention, and again, this is me from a training standpoint, but I do truly feel like most people who really care about inviting people in and building community and making yoga accessible, most of us really try to come from a place, right, where things are not intimidating. So, my recommendation to anyone who is looking for a new place to go is to really do a little bit of research. Sometimes it's asking around with friends and others, finding out for a place where you feel welcome and comfortable. For us at our studio, one of the things I always try to share with people is that aside from the fact that, of course, we try to do our best to identify the levels of classes and everything else on our website, we are a place where if someone walks in the room who's new and maybe they signed up for a class that maybe wasn't the ideal class for their first one around, right? No one's going to leave you hanging. So the idea is if you're new to this and you feel uncomfortable, you should not be worried. You should not be intimidated by it. We're going to offer different levels for other students. So, if you take a class with me, Pilates is a great example. I might give 3 or 4 different ways to actually attack a pose, if you will, because sometimes for somebody who's new, you might not nearly have the capacity or sort of the body awareness to get to somewhere else with somebody who's been practicing for a couple of years, couple of decades in some cases. But we're here to support you and we're here to meet you where you are. So, do your best not to sign up for an advanced class on day one. But as I said, we're definitely going to support you. You shouldn't be afraid. And honestly, unless you have some really serious injuries or limitations, which of course you should always just talk about with your physician or a trusted person in that field, really yoga can be accessible for everybody, whether it's chair yoga, whether it's gentle yoga, or whether it's an all levels class where again that teacher is going to go ahead and maybe give you 3 different ways to attack a pose. You're going to feel supported and you're not going to feel alone. The other thing I think people are always worried about, right, is they want to find their corner in the back or somewhere where they feel like they're going to be unseen. Everyone in the room, they're not going to look at you at all. They're also thinking to themselves, I don't want anyone to look at me. And they're looking dead ahead, like they've got these blinders on, right? Because the idea about yoga is you are supposed to be focused on yourself and going inward and making the practice yours. So, sure, you might be looking at the teacher. The teacher is the person who, if anything, you want to keep your eye on, but nobody else around you is looking at you. They're not going to judge you, and anything that you're worried about, the person next to you is worried about too. So know that you're not alone. So I would just say, absolutely give it a try. Us yogis always like to say you're only as old as your spine, right? So one things we all really need to be mindful of with every year that goes by, right? Particularly if we're getting into that over 50 sort of bracket, right? Is really spine health. So having that flexibility and that stability that you can get through a yoga and Pilates practice is really helpful. It also really helps with your balance. I don't want to make any misquotes here, but I like to listen to a podcast called the Zoe podcast. They always do health and wellness type stuff on research and whatever. And not so long ago, I listened to one of their podcasts and they talk about sort of what changes in your body as you start to get older and sort of once you take a fall, right? Like say you fall and you've broken a hip or you've broken or fractured a bone, sort of those types of incidents actually can lessen your lifespan, which is kind of scary, right? So if we can really work on our balance and our stability, all of those things that yoga is going to support you with, you're going to sort of be stronger and more flexible and stable as you sort of go into those older years. My mom, God rest her soul, my grandmother, she used to always complain that she had a hard time lifting her arms over her head when she got into like her 80s. So if you think about being somebody who, whether you're an independent woman and you're riding solo, or whether you're somebody who's lost a partner or whatever, I'm sure you want to be able, right, to be able to reach into those cabinets, do all those kinds of things. So really finding that strength. I will just go out there and tell you all that we have students who are in their 70s and 80s, and they practice alongside people who are 20 years old. So, and they're not necessarily people who have been practicing yoga since they themselves were 17. So again, please do feel like yoga is a space where you can feel safe and supported, and we would love to have you come give us a try.
Tell everybody about your 2 locations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, our first location, Jody gave a little nod, right? We actually opened our first location in the Brielle Library. So it is a private studio. So you walk in, it does look like a yoga studio when you're in there. We've got all the decor and all the props and all that kind of good stuff. And that was a really great way to, just from a business standpoint, right, to feel a little bit less nervous, right, about taking the plunge of being a business owner and having sort of all those responsibilities that go along with it, because the overhead was lower and it was a great way for us to get a sort of creative start. We built a wonderful community there, and then we just sort of outgrew the space. So the location I'm sitting in right now is our location in Silverton, which is a section of Tom's River that sort of borders Brick, if you're familiar with the area. So this is right here on Hooper Ave. And at this location, we actually have two sort of studios. The studio is divided in half. So we have one area where we offer all of our mat classes, which is a wide array of yoga classes, as well as mat Pilates and some fusion classes. And then in the other sort of studio, if you will, is where we've launched our Mooncore Reformer Pilates. So we do have equipment-based classes as well. We have a really unique apparatus in addition to the reformer that's called a fuse ladder. It can simulate a lot of the pieces of equipment that are used in a classical Pilates studio. So if you're familiar with a trapeze, a Cadillac, all that kind of good stuff, the fuse ladder sort of has the capability to bring that into the practice as well. It's also a really amazing tool because it can provide some extra support for people who may have injuries or others. So the ladder, as well as the reformer, are often used in physical therapy. So again, if you're somebody who feels like you need something that's a little bit lower impact, those equipment classes are a great place to start. And we do have different level classes, so you can get your feet wet first before you decide to dive into anything that feels a bit more challenging.
Incredible. It just sounds all incredible and amazing and only scary when you say the ladder and the trapeze, but fun at this, but exciting at the
It's
same
very
time.
fun.
Yeah, it sounds very, very fun. I like the trapeze idea. You're juggling so much, and there's people listening to this saying, "How does she do it all?" You know, you've got that a very impressive full-time job that is really all about creating community and working with some major organizations as well as some that are smaller. And then you're running two studios with list of yoga teachers as well, or instructors, I should say, yoga instructors, and then also you have those who are coming, who are your clients. So there's a balance between all of it. Tell the person who's listening, that's thinking of starting something new while they have a full-time job, what's your secret? And do you have one?
So I think again, as far as being authentic and being transparent, right? I do want to say it's hard. Like it is challenging. So if you are somebody who feels like, if you're like me, right, and you're also a pragmatist and you feel like the idea of giving up your job, which you not only love, but also is the thing, right, that pays the bills and give you great benefits and all those types of things. Sometimes it's really hard to take the plunge and step away from that. I would love to be that person in the future. I hope to be, as I continue to build this brand. But I feel like I would be remiss in not saying sometimes it is really hard. And there are really long days, right? So, on Tuesdays I work 16 hours a day. I've made that choice to do it, to let that be part of my lifestyle. I sometimes feel like, hey, when you're young, make it work. And I'm still in my 30s, but getting closer and closer to 40 as the days go by. So I think the key, though, right, is if you're willing to put in that type of sort of effort and time commitment, there's a couple of things I would say that are really critically important. One is passion for what you're going to do, because one of the things that gets really hard, even when you are doing something you love, when you're working the long hours, people are lying if they don't tell you that every once in a while they just don't want to be there, right? They just don't have the love for what they're doing, because sometimes life is just too much, right? And things are too busy. So, when those moments happen, those are the times, right, where you have to go back to the tools that you have in your toolkit to try to reset and to give yourself that time to recharge. So I would say if you're somebody who feels like you want to do it all and there's something you're really passionate about, don't forget to give yourself that me time. For me, being a person who's a teacher, and I teach 15 classes a week on top of my job, um, teaching, as much as I love it, it's not necessarily the time that I carve out, right, for myself for self-care. So you have to find those moments, whether it's 5 minutes before you get off to your job in the morning, or whether it's a rainy weekend and you decide, listen, that social media post, that email, it can wait till tomorrow. I'm going to park on this couch and I'm going to read a book or watch some bad TV or whatever it might be. It's always to remember to give yourself that recharge time, because if you don't, you will burn out and then you will start to lose love for the thing that you're so passionate about. So really make sure to take care of yourself. The other big tip I would just say, and it may be a partner, a spouse, a family member, a friend, I think it's also just really having people in your court who support you, and people who are going to sort of have this acceptance, right? Or give you this grace that sometimes, because you've taken this on, you might not be able to always make it to that dinner or that holiday or that whatever, because if you're the sole business owner, right, and you've got all these people you're managing and people who are relying on you, to come in for those classes and get their me time in, sometimes, you have to have people in your corner who understand what you're doing, and they're going to love you all the same, and they realize you love them all the same back, right? It's just this time in your life where you're really busy and you're trying to make it work so that one day maybe life is a little bit less hectic. So, I can't speak highly enough of my husband, who is like my rock in everything. He, comes and cleans the studio on weekends and does all these little tasks that I'm sure he doesn't want to have to do, because of course he's been working all week and everything else. And I have a family who's super supportive, who, they come to the studio, they come to events. I've got friends who feel the same. So it's just, we all have our team, right? It's like you want to have your team of people who support you, and the people who aren't afraid, right, to hear sort of your late night phone call where you just say, "Oh, I don't know how I'm doing this. Like, I feel like I just can't go one more day without a break," right? Like, you have these people who are willing to kind of remind you why you got involved and what you got involved in. So, there's no magic formula, but I think passion is key. I think self-care is key. And I think just having people who support and respect what you're looking to do, is really important. As I've gotten older, I've really taken the stance that I just don't have time for people in my life who don't align with me or don't respect the things that are important to me. And that doesn't mean we all have to have the same opinions or things that we value, right? It's really more just this mutual understanding, right? Of like, people's lives are busy, people have different goals, they have different priorities. And like, so long as we can understand that about one another, right? Like, we can remain important to each other, and we can know, hey, maybe we go 6 months and don't see one another, but we'll pick up and have that dinner and it'll be just like yesterday. So I'm really grateful that most of the people in my life are those people, right? They've been there for me. They've supported me when I've had challenges, and just try not to go at something alone, right? Like, you can be somebody who thinks my way is the best way. I can admit I am one of those people many times, right? But your way isn't the best way always. And there's always people who can give you advice, always people you can learn from, and just be willing to learn too. In my particular field, and I mean the yoga and wellness and Pilates sort of world, training is also really important. So, as most of us, right, who are doers and shakers and movers, never feel like your learning is done. Just always make that commitment, right, to better yourself. And again, to not always think that, best, that there's always something you can learn. And I think yoga has taught me that, right, is that life is just one giant lesson, right? And you just keep on learning something new every day. And sometimes the lessons are hard. Sometimes they're ones you wish you did not have to learn. But if you believe in yourself and you believe in what you're doing, you should do it.
So just two quick things on that. So I have this whole mantra of when your why is greater than your how, right? Because if you had to think how you were going to make it all happen and have 15 hours of classes plus working full time plus all cleaning the studio and just all the things that go into it that people don't even realize that you're doing, right? They don't know the intricate details. Whether it's your accounting and all of that. So it's when your why is greater than your how, it's just to me always stay as connected as you can to your why, even though, like you said, sometimes it's just all so overwhelming. And I know this one so well. But also when you're talking about, there's always people who know more. And, I always say this, I'm a recovering control freak, right? Because I totally feel like,
Totally.
right? I feel like we have that in common.
Absolutely.
And it's not in a mean way. It's just that release of feeling like it's not even a power thing. I can't explain it. It's just that you want the end result to be a certain way. And if other people don't have that same vision, you're afraid to kind of let go of that piece and then it going in a different direction. For me, that's my piece. So I'm definitely a recovering control freak in
And I
multiple
think
areas
vision's
of my
the
life.
word, Jody. Like, that's the word, right? It's like we all have a vision, right? A lot of times. So if you feel like the vision is not being fulfilled, like, you get in this spiral. But it's like, okay, but maybe someone else has a vision that you didn't contemplate that maybe is great, and maybe it adds to what you're looking to do. So it's, letting ourselves, yoga also teaches you, right, go with the flow more, right? Like, go with the
Hmm.
flow, take what life throws at you, and like, be willing to learn and open up your mind a little more. So yeah, I'm that recovering control freak too.
Well, we have a lot in common. Just a few more quick things. Pink Moon, why that name?
So the pink moon is actually a moon. You can look it up online. It takes place in April. So the thing that's really cool about the pink moon is that the idea of the pink moon is really about rebirth, renewal, transformation. So, for us, when we started talking about this, as far as what the studio would be called, right? This was an opportunity for us to not only transform who we were, right? But for us to give that opportunity sort of for transformation for others. And that's not to say that people are not meant to be who they are, right? It was more about giving a space where people felt like they could grow into their best version of themselves. So, aside from the fact that I'm a huge Pink fan, right? I really thought that the sort of spiritual sentiment of Pink Moon was something that was significant and meaningful. And we always, every year, do something around the Pink Moon to sort of do the same, right? So, a lot of times we're talking about planting our seeds of intention, whether that's literally or figuratively, right? Like, what is it that you want to plant, that you want to take care of, you want to nurture, you want to see grow into something amazing? And I think the other thing that's really important to me about the sentiment of the pink moon is that also it sort of sets this precedent that there's always an opportunity for change, and change isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? So even over the course of time that we've had pink moon, we've grown and changed many times. I started with partners. I don't have partners anymore. One of them is still a teacher here, which is great. But sometimes life changes, life circumstances change, and like you have to be willing to go with the flow. And in addition to that, right, sometimes change is necessary, and sometimes it's a really amazing thing that was unexpected. Sometimes we have changes that we don't necessarily love happening, but I think with every change, there's something we can learn from and grow from, even if it's not great. So remembering that transformation, rebirth, renewal are things that are always available to you, right? Is you never have to stay stagnant in who you are, where you are. So that's sort of where the name came from.
I love it. And it makes perfect sense. And knew about the pink moon, obviously, but I just wanted you to share it for those who might not. And I love the name. So do you have a favorite book?
So a favorite book, I mean, are we going to talk favorite book, like something that's meaningful to change in business? Or are we going to talk a favorite book, like when I'm trying to unwind? Because if I want to go to a favorite book that's maybe in the lane of what we're talking about here, I do really love this book. Also, it's a great sort of listen if you're more of an audiobook person, called Think Like a Monk. And it's by Jay Shetty. Um, he's a youngish man who he essentially decided when he was in college that he wanted to become a monk. And he grew up in East Asia. And, there is a little bit of a different mentality culturally that, of course, I can't speak to from personal experience, only from, what he sort of shared in the book, right? That there often is this mentality of sort of, there are certain things that you should do in life to make you successful and nothing else is acceptable. So to quote him, he said that his, parents' perspective was, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, or you're a failure. So this was sort of the culture that he grew up in. So the idea of having to share with his parents that he wanted to become a monk was very scary for him, right? Like something that he thought they would never be willing to accept. And I will sort of, share that he did go through a monastery. He was a monk for a period of time. He is now back in the universe with the rest of us, sort of non-monk people walking around. But he came out of the monastery and decided that one of the things he felt called to do was essentially to share his experience in a way that would encourage people to find their purpose, right? To essentially feel like, what is it that speaks to you? What is it that calls to you? What is meaningful in your life? And it's essentially his kind of practical wisdom from the time that he spent as a monk. So he teaches a little bit about how to overcome negative thoughts, how to have a more fulfilling life. And some of the really interesting things about it are that I guarantee you, if any of you listen to or read this book, there will be moments where he makes suggestions that you say to yourself, there is no way like I could do that. Like that is not possible. And one of the things he talks about is actually talking about people. And one of the things that monks just are not going to do, right, is they don't talk about people in a negative way. So it's one of those things where if a negative thought comes through, right, like the idea instead is you sort of just let it come one ear, you push it out the other on a cloud. Like you're not going to sort of give in to that sort of negative energy, right, of bringing other people down, because for what purpose? Like who is that fulfilling? Who is that helping? And that's just one of many examples. Another thing that I thought was great that he talked about was sort of this recognition, right, that most of us, and he didn't say this, but I'm going to say it from an American standpoint, right? Like we very much live in a sort of work till you die kind of culture, right? Like we work really hard and it's the way sort of our society runs. And there's some things about that that is great, right? About like the passion and the work ethic, but there's something to be said about the fact that a lot of us don't have enough sort of self-respect or setting of boundaries for ourselves and the things that are important for us outside of, work. And one of the things he talks about is when you're a monk, like there's no alarms, there's no anything. So you spend this time getting your body more in tune with nature and the things that are around you, and to sort of train your body to like rise and go to sleep at the times that are best for your actual system and your body. Now, again, we all have jobs, we all have whatever. So you may not be able to sort of lean into that exactly the way he's talking, but he was raising the flag on how when your alarm goes off in the morning, for example, most of us have an alarm that's this blaring, it's some sort of air horn, something that essentially when we wake up, we're immediately putting our body into shock. So like when we think about like your parasympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight mentality, like we're waking up in like stress mode. So, he was trying to say that most of us in a sort of Western culture, right? Like that is the way we start our day, and that's not healthy, like for mind, body, or soul, right? So, a little tip on that, right, is if you need an alarm, you can't sort of train the brain to wake up when you need to and get where you need to go, is to try to use different sort of methods, right? Whether it's getting one of those alarm clocks that simulates sunlight, so it's light that wakes you up, whether it's something that has sounds from nature, so it's chirping birds or dripping water, like something that is soft and will ease you into your day. So I've really tried to practice some of the habits that he's mentioned in his book. And I think the biggest one for me is really just taking those moments when you think about things that upset you or make you angry that you feel like you need to put out into the universe, right? Like it doesn't actually help anyone. There's no one who benefits from sort of allowing that negativity to bubble up to the surface. I'm not saying that you can't journal it down, right? You can't get out those things that, you don't want to hold inside you anymore. We want you to let it go. But at the end of the day, it doesn't serve anyone to sort of talk poorly about people, to bring other people down. There's no benefit at all. So why spend our time on it when time is so limited? So I think it's a great book. I think it's really good for sort of coming up with a way to live a more mindful life, if you will. So that's definitely one of my favorite books.
That is great. I have to read that, and I'm definitely changing my alarm to something like the waves of the ocean.
Yeah.
That's the way. That is so the way to get up. So thank you for that. And is there a mantra you live by,
A mantra I live by.
or something that you think of that you go back to that's a saying that you've created for yourself?
I mean, I think a lot of times when I teach classes, everyone doesn't do this, but I do. I always do a dharma or an affirmation at the beginning of class. So I feel like I kind of go through a lot of these, right? As far as the things that are maybe meaningful to me in the moment or at that time. But I think one of the things that I focus on a lot is purpose, which I already talked about earlier. So I'm kind of cheating because I'm going to give two things. So one of them is perfect purpose, and the other is also just centered around self-love. And I say that because I'm somebody who, regardless of all the things that I may feel like I'm doing that are important or things that I've accomplished, I'm always really hard on myself. And I think a lot of us are hard on ourselves, right? So I think having that self-love and sort of loving yourself fully, right, is one of the sort of first steps to having a really wonderful and meaningful life. Because if you can treat yourself well, you can treat your body well, you can be appreciative of who you are and not criticize. That again is just one of the ways to sort of move forward with joy. And I think to have the sort of energy, right, that you can put out to others that encourages them to do the same. So I often go back to purpose, and that's a lot of times when I'm feeling like times are tough, right? When I'm tired, when I'm working really hard, it's purpose. My purpose, I feel like, is to heal and to support others. And I want to put that out there and to build community. And the self-love thing is something that I've struggled with a long time, from the time I've been a teenager. So, and I think women in particular, there's a lot of pressure sort of out there spoken or unspoken, and what we see and what we hear, and sort of, the people who we often look up to and these idealized visions of what we should all look like. And, even what, I'm not a parent, but again, like for the people who are the working moms who are doing it all and everything else, well, you and the person you see on E or whatever, you're not living the same life, and you should not hold yourself to the standards that you sort of see here out in front of you in the media and elsewhere. So, I think that's it. It's self-love, it's purpose, giving yourself grace, all of the above.
So well said. So thank you. Thank you. We could chat for another 2 hours. You know
Yeah.
that, right? But I want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything else you wanted to share that we didn't cover before we end this? But I want to invite you back. Definitely invite you back for updates.
I would love to come back. It's so great to be here with you. Like I said, I think we could chat forever. Really, honestly, I think we touched on so much. I would just say again, like for anyone who's thinking about whether it's pursuing something that you're really passionate about, or whether it's, taking your first step into this sort of wellness routine, right? It is really mind body. It's not just about one thing or the other. I think always finding some method of self-care, as I was just talking about, right? That self-love is really important. So whether you feel like no matter what I've said to you on this podcast, that yoga is or is not for you, or Pilates or other, just find something that you feel is really meaningful to your life and brings you joy and brings you happiness, and let that be the thing that you can always come back to when times are tough, right? Because we can all spare 5 minutes. We can all, if we think about the times we wake up in the morning, right? I don't know about you, but first thing I do, pick up that phone, start scrolling on that social media, doing all those things that
Terrible.
just put us
Yes.
into stress. I can admit my own flaws here. It's like for that 5 minutes that you spent, it could be 5 minutes where you did breath work, or 5 minutes where you just went out and sat on a porch or outside, got in touch with nature, yourself, whatever it may be. So just remember, you've always got 5 minutes for you, and you should make that commitment to finding it. And hopefully 5 turns into 15 and 30 and continues from there on out. So that would just be my last bit of advice, right? Is take care of yourself, lean into your purpose, and go with the flow.
Thank you, Sarah, for coming on and being a part of the podcast, now being part of the Changemaker community, and all the work that you're doing both at FMERA and the wonderful work and your wonderful business of Pink Moon Yoga and Wellness. We need it. So we're glad we have it here in this community. I'm very lucky to say that it's here in this community. And I'm going to say what I say at the end of every single podcast. Today is the day you cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what step, small or large, are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goals? Sarah Giberson, thank you again. And I can't wait to have you back on for some updates.
Thank you so much, Jody. I appreciate it and look forward to being part of the Changemakers community.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Please subscribe to the Today is the Day Changemakers YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. Also, Today is the Day is now hosting events with former Changemaker guests who have so much to share. These are incredible people who you would not typically have the opportunity to meet, as they are from all over the globe. You don't want to miss one of their incredible workshops and conversations. Go to todayisthedayliveit.com. Again, todayisthedayliveit.com. Have a great week, everyone.